Okay, so hello everyone. We're essentially trying to create some type of capacity analysis. So the easiest example I could think of, for me, I specifically work in manufacturing, but to give you guys a good example, I'm just going to think of cooking. So when I think of cooking, or even in the manufacturing or aerospace industry, you think of the procedures and processes that you need to essentially do in-depth time studies of. So for this example, I'm going to use cooking or some process line here. So I have the preparation for cooking. I have the actual cooking here. That's you actually have the time as well, and then I have the actual assembly portion of this. So try to think of it like this as best way possible. So this is the current chart that I use when I'm creating capacity analysis charts. So I think of the individual goal, the specific operation, which I just told you is preparing, cooking, and then storing away. In your case, it would probably be prep work, assembly line, and maybe finished goods. So the first thing you have to think of is the number of stations that you have in the specific line. So if I'm thinking about a warehouse, you probably have, or some assembly line for the actual cooking portion, you probably have maybe two or three of them. For the capacity, in my case, it's just a single, just one component at the same time. But in your case, you can probably have one tool or one operation that every time it slices or a machine or cuts some sheet material, you have it probably cuts two or three components, but in this case, it's just one. So for the individual time, this is where the time study essentially comes in play. When I'm preparing, it takes 30 seconds to prepare. Probably takes a lot more time in reality, but let's just say for argument's sake, it takes 30 seconds. The first thing that I do here, anything in green has a specific formula attached to it. So in my case, I'm doing this cell here, 30 seconds divided by 60, so I can get the amount of minutes. So 30 seconds of a minute is about half a minute, right? So this should equal 0.5, which it does there. Now the number of builds per hour. So there are 60 minutes in 1 hour. So whatever this value is divided by 60. But you also have to consider the number of stations and the capacity that each station provides. So that's what's duplicated, or excuse me, this is what's multiplied. So it's this times the number of pieces by the hour, which is in this case 60 divided by this value here. When you're running time studies, it's easier to see how much time it's taken in seconds. So this is just an easy conversion factor. When it comes to OEE, or especially when it comes to capacity analysis, you always have to consider OEE, overall equipment effectiveness. So in many cases, you learn more about this when you're taking Six Sigma courses or Scrum courses, or but nonetheless, this is something that's usually discussed within the team, specifically production management or other manufacturing engineers. For my case, I know it's going to be 85% because I might have a specific tool that goes down every now and then. So a safe bet for me is usually actually 75%, sometimes 65, but for this case, I use 85 for all of them. So it's just a percentage. The working hours per shift, I'm putting 7. Typically, people work an 8-hour shift, but you have to consider usually there's 2 breaks and 1 lunch. So that's 30 minutes at 15 and 15. An hour's gone, or maybe it's 10 and 10. I don't know. But over and all, they're usually just actually working within the 7 hours. Sometimes it's less, and that's up to your discretion. So again, another green. You want to see what the build is per shift. So there's 3 things at play here. There's the number of builds per hour times 7 hours. So this is in 7 hours, it's just a multiplication. But I'm also considering OEE. So this is where a fraction, essentially a percentage, where they're not really working in these full 7-hour shifts. There's always something else that you need to consider. So essentially what we're doing here is we're underestimating, right? Just to give them some opportunity to reach that amount. So that's 714. And now I know that in one day, in my case, there's 2 shifts. So majority of companies run through 2 shifts. Some of them only 1, which you'd only put 1 here, which in that case you probably wouldn't need this column here, but in my case it's 2 shifts. So the number of people required per day, this is a specific value of this is a goal that you're trying to reach divided by what you're able to meet in that specific day, because this is your goal or target. And I should probably goal per day. Let me just change that right there. So this is the number of people that you require. So think of it as if I only need to make 500, but I'm able to make almost 1500, I only need somebody to spend probably 30% of their time here, which is exactly what we have, 0.35. So this 0.35 essentially is 30% of somebody's entire day, right? So now if I look at cooking, I know cooking, there's only 1 station, 1 capacity. It's just, you know, cooking 1 order at a time. It takes me essentially 2 minutes to actually cook. In reality, it's probably about 3 or 4, but let's just leave it at 2. Again, it's stations times capacity. But now you have to consider that there's 60 minutes per hour, so it's 60 divided by this value here. So same thing again, 85%, 7-hour shift. This is a 3 multiplication. It's 30 I can build per hour times 7 hours. That's 1 shift is 7 hours, and in considering my OEE as well. So again, this is 2 shifts, so it's this value times 2, and in this case it's the goals divided by day. This goal is usually just considered as a whole, so you can even formulate it so that it always reads one specific value. But for this case, let's just assume, you know, you may have a different goal for different operations. Like you may want to store more, so you want to store over 100 more, then that value can change. So at the end here, I also kind of have a total amount. So you may want to consider, what is the total amount I need to spend for the individual piece overall. You may want to see how many builds you can do per hour as a total, but this probably won't make sense because there's a line that has to go down. Because, for example, just because you can store 80 in 1 hour doesn't mean you won't be able to, because you're held up by the lowest quantity number. So instead of it being a summation, it might be better off writing this as a minimum number, because you're limited to this operation here is limited to the one before it. So if this can only get to 30 in that single day or in that single hour, this one, just because it can reach 80 doesn't mean, you know, overall that's what you can reach. So that's something to consider along the line. Same thing here, I put it as a minimum, because just because you can build 714 here doesn't mean that this will be able to keep up with that amount. So, which is why, you know, having 2 or 3 people, they could spend a third of their shift here, majority of their shift here, and then the rest of the remainder of their time just storing things away. So essentially the minimum that they can build per day, the bare minimum here is 357. So this is essentially one way to see this. So for the capacity chart, what I did is you want to select the operations, and if you're looking for the build per day, select this as well. Let's go to insert 2D column chart, and while I'm in here, I can put my axes titles. I don't need this guy here. In my case, I'm going to go ahead and change this to builds per day. Let's change this to capacity chart, and let me just bring this down. So in my case, I want to make sure I can see my data labels as well, so I can see what's the mark here. Now notice I'm missing my goal. So there's a lot of ways to do this, but if you right click, press select data, you can add a series here. So what this does is it adds to this chart. So the series name is goal per day, and I'm just gonna select these three right there. So right now it's coming up as another essentially another histogram or bar chart, I guess. So I want to change that, and how to do that is go to chart design here, change chart type, and in here you're allowed to kind of change what kind of chart type you're going to get. I'm going to choose line and make this a secondary axis, or you can leave it the same. It's really up to you. But now you can see this chart axis is different from this, so let's just match it. If I double click here, you see your minimum and maximum. I'm going to boost this up to 1800, and if I go here, do the same there. Now they should match, and there you go. Now you'll be able to see in preparing and storing, I've definitely met my mark. Maybe I can add data label there. Oh. Data label, there you go. So I don't need this one or this one, just need this guy right there. There you go. This is something I do. I like to change the font. Let's make this bold, underlined. Maybe we can bring a couple things down. There you go. And that should do it. That essentially demonstrates this is your actual goal, and if you wanted, you can actually put a legend. Kind of shows you what's what. If you wanted to change the series name here, this is series number 1. Just go edit, and let's call that operation. There should be a really nice chart right there for you. Okay, I hope this helped.